And for Denny Hamlin, he was leading the race and got wiped out by Alex Bowman. Bowman said he got loose, and then Hamlin claimed that he didn't mean to spin him out. And Hamlin called Bowman a hack and also called out Bowman for not performing like his Hendrick teammates weekly, considering the equipment that he in, and the 11 team felt like it was coming after the race. Hamlin pulled up to Bowman's car, both cars nose to nose, interrupting his victory burnout. Cameras later showed Hamlin giving Bowman the middle finger inside the cockpit. Was Bowman's move lack of respect, hard racing, or just what this playoff format demands?
I believe it was the bump and run. Normally we see that at Bristol, but we saw that at Martinsville today. I believe it was just hard racing, and so I'll throw it over to Ben.
Well, I'd say it was a dump and run because ultimately Hamlin ended up losing it and the caution came out. I think a bump and run is when you just move the guy out of the way. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say lack of respect. If you want to believe what Alex Bowman said, he didn't mean to do it. And I'm inclined to believe that, maybe he just got in a little bit too hot or whatever the case may be if he got loose. So perhaps it's a combination of all three. Obviously it's hard racing, but, I don't really think you can fault the drivers for what they have to do here at Martinsville. And, maybe it's a little bit different for Bowman considering he's no longer playoff eligible. But, you go back to what, ironically, Denny Hamlin did to Chase Elliott in 2017, what Chase Elliott did a few laps earlier, what everybody seems to forget based on what happened with him and Denny Hamlin a few laps later, but kind of shoving Brad Keselowski out of the way and up out of the groove on the restart. That pretty much ruined Brad's race. And 2018, when Joey Logano got Martin Truex Jr. back, Truex worked so hard to pass him completely cleanly. And then on the last lap, Logano just completely returned the favor by moving him out of the way and didn't care at all. So, that's ultimately what he had to do because that locked him into the championship four. He went on to win the title that year. So, to answer the question, I think ultimately of those three things, the biggest factor is that this is what this playoff format demands, and it's the culture that has been manifested. And I always go back to, if you go back to the radioactive after Matt Kenseth dumps Joey Logano in 2015, it's actually Denny Hamlin that comes on the radio and says, I can't believe what this sport has come to. And how do you crown a real champion now? It's just the wild, wild west. And, I think that's a perfect encapsulation of where NASCAR is right now in 2021. Now, that may be what you like. I guess we hear 8 out of 10 fans like it, if we're inclined to believe our president, Steve Phelps. But or maybe he's talking about the package, or I don't know. There's so many different quotes that get thrown around all the time. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's very hard for me to put any blame on the drivers because that's the system and time period that we're in, and that's what it demands.
Yes, and as they always say in sports, when we're in situations like this, you always blame the rules, blame the game, but don't blame the player. And here we can't really blame the drivers for what this playoff format demands. It was just really chaotic there towards the end for most of the race. It was actually relatively tame, which kind of surprised me. Well, tame from Martinsville, and then towards the end, that's when all the chaos and mayhem broke out. And we all saw the post race scene. Denny Hamlin very, very upset with Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman's trying to celebrate, but Denny Hamlin we saw the two drivers nose to nose, and Denny Hamlin drove by, giving the Texas salute. But the thing is, Alex Bowman not going to Phoenix with a chance to win the championship. Denny Hamlin, he's in the championship four. He has a chance to win his very first NASCAR Cup Series title. So when you saw Denny Hamlin in the post-race scene doing this to Alex Bowman, do you think during the moment he really lost sight of the bigger picture?
Yeah, well, I think I said it in the earlier part of the question here. It's just kind of they call Bowman Gray the madhouse, and we saw a lot of what we associate with Bowman Gray today, and it's the culture of where our sport is right now, and it's accepted because traditionally NASCAR hasn't put their foot down. In rare cases they have, and I think it is worth mentioning that they were on Big NBC today, and Denny Hamlin did drop an F-bomb in his post-race interview. And Dale Jr. fans certainly haven't forgotten 2004 when Jr. was on Big NBC and got a little over-enthusiastic with his language at Talladega when he was being interviewed. So, I don't think NASCAR will go so far as to issue a points penalty or take Hamlin out of a championship four or whatever. But I would be very surprised if when you factor that in, the fact that they were on network TV and that did happen, plus the fact that he did what he did with his car after the race was over again, when Alex Bowman was trying to celebrate, I would be very surprised if Hamlin isn't at the very least issued a fine or some sort of reprimand. Like I said, I don't think he'll be suspended or denied a chance to compete for a championship. But I think NASCAR certainly has to put their foot down and send a message that this kind of thing is unacceptable and not what we should be seeing in the top level of professional stock car racing in the United States.
I'll agree with that completely. And it's like, I was surprised to see Denny Hamlin do that in front of his home state fans on his home track. And I believe Denny Hamlin should be fined. I don't know how much of a fine, but he definitely deserves to be fined. Probably, I'll say at least maybe like a $10,000 fine or something like that, because that is uncalled for. That is unacceptable. And I feel sorry for Alex Bowman for what he had to go through, in a celebration. That was not called for whatsoever.
Yeah, well, and if you want to talk about precedents being set, go back to what Quinn Houff did today.
Yeah.
In retaliation there, and that was a 5-lap penalty for the Starcom racing driver. So, you want to talk about precedents being set. NASCAR set the precedent just a few hours ago with that penalty that they issued, and now Denny Hamlin comes and does something similar, making contact with another car. And, arguably, I don't know if Bowman had his helmet off at that point or the seatbelts were undone or what. I know the race was definitely over. He was starting to celebrate. But, you want to talk about setting a precedent, to give a guy a 5-lap penalty for spinning somebody out under caution in front of a safety truck. I just don't see how NASCAR can let this be swept under the rug and not issue some sort of reprimand Denny Hamlin's way.
As you guys bring up a lot of excellent points. Yeah, that was definitely a major safety concern there when Josh Bilicki got dumped by Quinn Houff under caution next to the safety truck, and then Alex Bowman, when a lot of drivers at that point are unbuckling to climb out to celebrate, for Denny Hamlin to do that was totally uncalled for him to do that. I remember several years ago, might have been 5 or 6 years ago, can't actually remember the year. I remember at Charlotte Motor Speedway, Brad Keselowski, after the race at Charlotte Motor Speedway under the lights on the oval, it was very upset with someone. I can't remember who it is right now, but Matt Kenseth, he was unbuckled at the time, and Keselowski come up and hit the side of Kenseth's car at the time. And while Kenseth was unbuckled, then we saw a post-race scum where Kenseth just ran over to Keselowski, and both of them started fighting. So that was a safety concern back then. And
that was 2014, and I think ironically it might have been Hamlin as well involved in that, and I think Tony Stewart might have been involved in that as well. I know Kenseth went after him in the hauler in the garage area, but there were definitely some penalties issued there. And I think again what it comes down to, Keselowski was penalized because he did what he did with his car and used the car as a weapon, if you will. So I think you've got to factor that in when talking about what to do with Hamlin here.